I was just saying, I don't know how many people are going to be joining us, so it obviously wasn't a requirement, but America.
Hi.
But Sylvia had the great idea for all of us to get together, and yeah, I thought that it would just be fun for us all to get to know each other a little bit. I was hoping that we could just go around and introduce ourselves real quick, just so that you have an idea of who each other is and where you're coming from. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, cool. I don't know the order that you all are on your own screens, so I'm just gonna like call on each one of you. It feels kind of like a class all of a sudden, but if you could just say, you know, who who you are and where you're from, and I would also love to hear just a little bit about the thought processes that you had while you were making the work for Near and Far, and you know, kind of like what you were thinking about with your piece. And I'm sure that each other would love to hear that. So Emily, you're in my top left corner, and it's just like reading a book. So I'm going to start with you.
Okay. I'm Emily Ritter. I currently am living in Mesa, Arizona. I am originally from Kansas, from Wichita, Kansas. And the thought process behind my print, so I did the tomato plant, or the 2 tomato plants, one living, one dying, prior to the pandemic. So like a lot of my work recently has been about plants. I don't know if you can see all the plants behind me. There's a few. Some of them are doing okay, some of them aren't. But prior to the pandemic, I wanted to have a garden. Like I've just always wanted to have a garden, getting to that point in my life where I want to like grow my own food and get to know it better and have plants around me, especially living in the desert. I'm wanting that green more and more the longer I'm here. Some of you who are still in the valley, the desert, understand, or maybe if you've been in a place where there's not a lot of plant life, you also get it. So that was my goal. And then like the weekend before the shutdown happened here, I bought a tomato plant, a cucumber plant, and some herbs. And then my garden just kind of exploded, and the first 3 attempts at my garden failed pretty bad, because it's all container gardening. So a lot of plants died, and it was always a battle. There was always some kind of new pest, but it was me learning how to garden, and that's kind of what I've been wanting to do, to document that process of trial and error, which can also like be related to so many other things of trial and error, right? If you're teaching right now, trial and error of that, or even trial and error of like making work. Like I haven't made prints in a very long time either. So even just making the print itself and getting back into printmaking was an attempt, a successful attempt, unlike my first tomato plant. But so that's kind of some of that.
Cool, thank you. Kelsey, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, so I guess, okay, I'll start with where I'm from. So I'm from Nebraska, but I also live in Mesa, like Emily. And I guess I was kind of in the same boat as Emily. Like I was trying to get back into making work, and not having access to a studio all of a sudden. Like that was the first or second print that I printed at home in my bedroom. So it was like a lot of trial and error trying to become a screen printer. But I think with my work lately, I've been thinking just about like I think my forms and colors are really optimistic, but I also feel like kind of overwhelmed. So I don't know, trying to make things that are complicated and overwhelming, but optimistic, and like trying to control things. And I don't know, I'm like kind of, I feel like I'm going somewhere different in my prints right now, and I haven't conceptualized it, but those are just the feelings I'm thinking about right now. I don't know. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
No, I think that you got it all.
All right.
Jonathan, you're up next.
Well, Jonathan, I'm from Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and I did go to grad school at ASU, Arizona State, not Arkansas State. Get that confused a lot. Uh, and, the thought, well, the process behind my work is the Black on Black art for the African American community, which is much needed more now than before. Um, so that's where the black ink on the black paper comes from, and the thought process, I use my family heritage. Um, Talking to my grandma like as of recently, and she was telling me about places where she grew up at in like rural parts of Arkansas. Like sometimes some of them not even considered a town anymore. They just like combine them with the nearest town. So I just go out on the field, well, go out myself and take pictures myself. That way, um, for copyright infringement policies, I guess they can't say I stole it. So it's like actually my art that I take a picture of, and every picture that every image that I have in my prints now are pretty much based around family. So that was my great 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 uncle house that that's in the portfolio. So I just had to take that picture for her and for me personally, because that's like my heritage, and I cannot like forget that. So I just had to document that too, also.
That's great. Thanks, Jonathan.
Welcome.
Sylvia, you're up next.
Yeah. So I'm Sylvia Poniecki. I'm originally from Hungary, and I live in the UK for about 13 years now. And I'm an architect, and I just finished my master's degree in fine art this September. And I mostly do paintings, so like making printed. I did prints like so many years ago that actually I think I forgot everything. So it was like coming back to do it again, and I really enjoyed it. And because I work with dreams and the unconscious, and I do a lot of layering on my paintings, and I just did the same thing with the prints. So I used, I think, 4 different layers on top of each other. That was basically the process, and yeah, I work with like very simplified dreamscape elements, and yeah, that's it.
That's great. Yeah. George, you're up next.
So, hi everyone, I'm George Svougaras. I'm originally from Crete in Greece, but I've lived in the UK for most of my adult life. And I know Sylvia because we are part of a same group, a collective. So my background is I was a teacher of art, and then I became a school manager, and I ended up managing a special school. But I retired from that to actually pursue my art career because I always had this plan, and it's been great. So my work's about my family. It's about my background because growing up in England, I suppose really the primary thing for me as a young adolescent was to fit in. So I kind of suppressed a lot of cultural things, just simply for convenience. You know, it's what I guess migrants do and what people do. So when I stopped, you know, being in an environment where it was a priority for me to kind of adhere to certain norms, you know, I became very aware of it. So I started to explore the idea of the past, how we're shaped, how national rhetoric and, you know, cultural nuances influence the way that we grow into adulthood, what baggage we carry. And the print I made was, at the time, you know, there was a lot going on with George Floyd, and here, of course, with the toppling of the Colston statue in Bristol. And all communities are interconnected, and you have to be very careful when you explore other people's, political priorities, but I felt compelled to do something about the history of Kentucky. I thought if the print's coming to Kentucky, I thought it would be great to do a bit of research on land ownership and particularly black farmers in Kentucky. And there's a lot of history and a lot of material that, I looked at. And subsequent to the print, I started reading some of Langton Hughes' poetry, I Too, about I Too Am America. And it kind of resonated with me on, on a human level. I didn't take ownership of that pain, that hurt, but I felt compelled to enmesh it with my own personal feelings about unity, humanity, the way that we should all kind of own each other's struggles. In that way we can not become politicized, but we can actually do something about things that matter. Anyway, so my thought processes were around those issues. And I wanted to make a print that celebrated that black land ownership in Kentucky. And so my print is based on 1920s and 30s printmaking, particularly wood engraving, which is beautiful, absolutely, breathtaking work, mainly by women, I have to say, and very often really not celebrated as much as it ought to be. So I brought that into the work. It's a panacea of everything I felt, passionate about at the time, and it drove me to make something that was meaningful for me. So that's it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Jessica, you're up next.
So hi, Jessica Page. I'm originally from Michigan. Moved around a little bit since, lived in Arizona for a little while. I guess with my piece, so I did the cyanotype with the kale image and the flocked writing above on top. And for that, I was kind of thinking of like when we had the shutdown stay-at-home orders, the things I did to try to mentally, emotionally cope with everything. And one of the major things was food. Food as like a comfort, but then it was also kind of a stressor as well, because at least here, I don't know how it was in the UK, but we had a lot of like shortages in grocery stores. So the stress of just going to the store to get stuff and then having a lot of the shelves be empty was also the stressor. So that's kind of just what I had in mind when I was working on my print, is somehow trying to convey that balance of this is a comfort thing, but also part of the stress as well. So.
Great, thank you. Aaron, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron Foster. I'm an artist and educator currently located in Northeast Ohio. I originally hail from the Appalachian region of kind of like West Virginia, Maryland, in there. And that's really what the print that I made for this portfolio is kind of rooted in. When I was presented with the theme, I started thinking about the concept of near and far and sustenance and what's kind of like pulling me through this moment that we're in right now. And I started thinking about my connection to Appalachia and just kind of growing up there, and stories about kind of a hard scrapple existence of life. I mean, it wasn't just a story, it was a lived experience. I think for me and my family, I'm part of a cohort that came out of that area at the time that would be considered like first generation college students. And so I started thinking about what's pulling me through, like this is a hard and kind of weird moment. And I think my connection to that place and to those stories and the idea that people have survived hard times and will survive hard times going forward was inspiring to me and has been inspiring to me, and maybe kind of helped me put some of the minor inconveniences like lack of creature comforts or whatever have you, right, in perspective. And so the imagery in that is the kind of combination of my own photography and family photography, built up through layers of CMYK printing and just like flat layers of screen printing, all meant to sort of kind of draw a circle around what it is that's kind of keeping me grounded in a kind of weird time.
Great. Thank you. That's great. David, you're up next.
Sorry, I always forget to unmute still after all this time.
Yeah.
So my name's David. I teach at University of Kentucky. So I live in Lexington. I've lived in Kentucky almost my whole life. I went to grad school at Purdue University in Indiana, and then came back here to teach. My print was called Cannon Fodder. It's on gray paper. It's got a grid with faces on it. And I've been using a lot of this imagery lately to sort of represent the internet, the grid in the back, and sort of like board game imagery to think about like how people are connected anyway before this print exchange. But I started thinking about like online communities and how where, you know, we were sort of separated from people that we see every day, but then these online communities, whether it be like Facebook groups, even just like people you sort of see on Twitter or like Instagram, sort of became a little bit more active in the beginning of the lockdown. But in particular, I signed up to play this online strategy game, which I would never do before this. But you know, I was like immediately kicked out of this game, probably because I just had no experience and no like prior ties to the people. But so the thinking about the imagery for this really started with like these windows that we're in now, and laying out like lots of different ideas for kind of like comic book imagery, but in windows, like Zoom windows. But I didn't feel like I was real comfortable with that because I hadn't been using any of that imagery before. So I found these facial features I've used in other prints and kind of distorted people. You know, it's sort of a little bit of like a metaphor for online personas and things like that. It is the first time I've ever put my own name in a print, which I was like, I forget what it's, I think it says Wisher the robot is after you. So that was sort of like, I would never do that unless it was for a print exchange, I don't think. So I like print exchanges because I try to just sort of do odd things I wouldn't do before, just to, because I know it doesn't have to necessarily grow into like a series or anything like that. That's all.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Marika, you're up next.
Yeah, mine it's like very green, and it's a screen print that has a lot of little like bugs in it. And it was kind of like the thought process was really about like since the pandemic, like spending more time in my own apartment. And I live in like a basement apartment that was probably last finished in like the 1950s or 60s or something like that. So I have a lot of like bug friends like in my apartment. And I think I was just thinking of that and kind of like sort of trying to kind of turn them into something like fun and cute, because they're just sort of like here. So yeah.
Great. Thank you. And you're local from Lexington.
Yeah, that's right. I'm from Seattle, Washington originally, but I am an MFA student at the University of Kentucky.
Cool. And I will go last because I also decided to participate. So Anthony Mead, obviously, and I live in Lexington, Kentucky, which you've probably all figured out by now. A lot of my work has to do with humans' relationship to fire, and it's a theme that I've been working with for a long time. And so for this piece, I was thinking about the ways in which, you know, as early humans, we would gather around a fire, and that was, you know, our central meeting point. And now, as you know, things have progressed, this is the way through these screens, especially right now, is the way in which we are gathering together as communities, especially during COVID-19. And so the back of the print is a wood block of a burnt piece of wood, to speak to, speak to the hearth or speak to a campfire or something. And then the screen print of the grid over top of it, similar to how David was saying, is I'm also using this kind of language of the grid in a lot of my more recent work, of thinking specifically about screens. So there's all that, and then it blends between blue and red, and that is because I also have just been completely consumed with the political climate in the United States. We, of course, had a pretty big election that's still going on right now, and there's a lot of angry back and forth that also takes place within these screens, right? And so there's the extreme red on one side and extreme blue on the other side. But I think that truly, there's this blending that happens in between. I don't think that ultimately any of us are in extreme camps, or the majority of us are not in extreme camps. We all believe different things. And I think that if we could really come together as a community, like we may be used to around a fire, and we could just talk it out and understand each other as human beings, then we would be in a better place. So those were the thoughts that I had while I was making my print. So thank you all for sharing there. I have a number of different questions that we could maybe just use as prompts to develop a conversation. But before I launch into those, I also was curious if any of you have questions for each other, either really specifically or more broadly speaking. And I wanted to give you that opportunity to ask those first.
I actually have a question. And I was just wondering, it was a struggle for me a little bit to kind of find ways of working from home. And so I was wondering if any of you had some really, I guess, tips or like resources or unique solutions that you came up with during all of this COVID stay-at-home situation.
I don't have any tips, but it was a struggle for me too, so I feel the same way.
I actually used it as a time to finish old like digital art that I was working on, because as you know, like we couldn't get into the art building, and there was sort of, I don't know, a couple months there where I couldn't print. But all this, I started just thinking about all the things that like my students would recommend to, because they all use Procreate to draw on their iPads, and I never had done that. So that was one thing that I did. Was one day I was just like, well, let's see what happens with Procreate. And then so I've just been doing that ever since. Like, even though we have access now, I've been sort of doing risographs and stuff of phone drawings. And so yeah, it was really hard to lose access, and I'm so afraid of losing access again. So wear a mask, people, so we can make prints.
That should just be the headline that we use for everything. Just wear a mask so that we can make prints.
Yeah, I don't have any suggestions about how to make life easier in lockdown working from home, but I found that I've created different spaces for different kinds of work around the house. I mean, I'm very lucky, the kids have moved on, and, we have the house to ourselves, but we both work from home. So it's become a kind of a very different world. The thing that I felt at first was I felt kind of resentful that I couldn't go to my studio. I mean, I could go in, we've got access, and we've got 24-hour access, but we couldn't use the print works downstairs. And also I felt like if there was something wrong with me, or I picked something up and I went in and I passed it on to someone, I just, you know, it just made me feel very precarious, you know, and I was surprised that I felt that way. I thought I would be more robust, you know. But like you, I've taken on working on the iPad and various other technical things, and but my relationship with the printers that do my big work and the commission that I've been working on has been very problematic. You know, going into the museum to talk to people, and there's no technical help. Everything has to be done, you know, lifting and shoving things on your own. It's become a very strange existence. But my advice would be, you know, just keep on working every day. You know, I keep telling myself, you know, get up, do whatever you need to do to get yourself in the frame of mind, and then do something, a creative act a day. I know it's old advice, you know, and it's kind of old school, but it really has been great, you know, just having that feeling that at the end of the day you've accomplished something. Could be just a drawing, small thing, you know. That's my golden nugget. I've got nothing else. Yeah.
I don't know if it's advice. So like with the motivation end of it, I've been struggling to make work. I have no advice on that front. The make stuff every day. Although I did do like one of those October challenges and that burnt me out. I made it to like October 20th and I'm like, will I be able to make art again this year? But when it comes to like studio space and like process, I think it's a great time to embrace the DIY aspect of it. It's easy for me to say that because I've been focused on that aspect of doing things since undergrad. When I was in my undergrad, the studio moved locations and kept changing every semester in my print program, which was really frustrating because like everything kept changing. You couldn't really get work done. So I started focusing on how can I do this in my own space, and how can I do this in a space that I can move and it can go with me. And I did the same thing in graduate school. Even though I had access to a space, I wanted to be able to like make sure that I had access to it no matter what. So printing by hand, rough screen printing. I won't like bore everybody with all the tips that I have. But I think embracing like the DIY aspect and like maybe the imperfections that come with that. I mean, I've been printing with styrofoam sheets, and they're not perfect, but it's something. So I think that's my tip. Just going with it and maybe print with dirt. I really want to print with dirt. That's my next thing. Because who knows if you can actually get ink shipped to you, because the stock might be out because of some other new thing that happens. So embracing experimentation.
Yeah, I don't know that it's advice, but I'd say take hold of the moment with both hands, I guess, is how I've sort of thought about it, in that like too often outside of graduate school, or just even in graduate school, I guess, there's this kind of production mindset that sinks in, that I constantly have to be making, I have to constantly be showing, I have to constantly be looking for the next opportunity. But I think we all know that the best work comes from the world of thoughts as much as the world of making. And so using this kind of forced asides time as a place to read, research, connect with other communities that are doing things that are new or innovative to you, thinking about expanding and reframing. For several years now as an educator, I'd have these conversations with BFA students who had just now fallen in love with printmaking and were desperately concerned about what they were going to do to keep that up on the outside. And my advice to them was, reframe what you think about a multiple, right? Like think about, are Xerox copies, a viable way to kind of continue to have a print practice? Are prints off of your Epson printer at home prints? Think about what is printerly, right? And what you can kind of carry over into the things that you can do at home. So I guess my advice would be to kind of like embrace the kind of conceptual impositions that are being forced upon you and find what you can in that.
I think it's so, Aaron, hearing you talk right now, and also with the experimentation that Emily had mentioned, it just triggered a memory that I had from the very beginning of the lockdown, so like back in March. And it was actually, Aaron, it was something that you posted on Facebook into one of like the major, or one of like the, we're teaching printmaking at home and how are we going to do this sort of things. And it was this DIY, you know, putting wax paper over the top of a substrate and passing it through a printer.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is awesome. I want to learn to do this. And so, you know, did it at home. And it was great. And I did a couple of prints that way. And I think something for me, so in a past life, when I was getting out of undergrad and was in the spot like, I don't know what I'm going to do, me and some friends from undergrad, we all started a print shop called Dinderbeck, and it's in Grand Rapids, Michigan, which is where I went to undergrad at. And it's still going today, though I think that they've struggled with, you know, kind of like what George was saying, you know, are we going to be open? You know, how are we going to navigate that and potentially getting people sick? But I think what's great about it is that, about the situation that we're in, of course, there's so many negatives. But one nice thing that comes for the printmaking side is so often we're like, how do we make without access to all the things in a shop? Like, how do I make without a press? Or like, I do lithography. How am I ever going to do a litho, you know, without all the different chemistry and everything? And so all the DIY that comes out, and then those students that are going through it right now, or for those of us who are just, you know, professional artists trying to figure out how to make in this new environment, those are all brand new tools that we get to take away, you know, into our future practices and current practices. And I'm very excited about what that means for the future, you know. So thank you, Aaron. I appreciate that, you know, tutorial how to.
Yeah, I'm glad it helped someone out.
Yeah. Anyone else have questions that you've been curious about, or just statements?
It was hard for me to pretty much, like Emily said, get back in the rhythm. But once I took the pictures, I just had like a pile stock of images. So once I got the email said I was in the show, that's when I like went back into production mode. And this is the only laser on campus right now. We have it, our department here at my job. So it was a whole struggle and trying to figure out how to use that laser too. That's a whole different laser than what I was taught. So the processes were different, the layout and the programs. So that was struggling. And then I just started working on digital work, working digital with my images, trying to figure out how to communicate with the laser through my method of processing my images for my current work. But I figured something out. So that was like the print that I had in the portfolio was the second print, because the first one was too much. It was it was just everything that was going on. Everything that could happen did happen in the first print. So so that was like the only struggle I had, trying to figure out that. And being in lockdown, I couldn't come on campus to set the laser up. So it was like pretty much I did all this in like 2 weeks. So it was like struggling trying to get a laser out of one room to the next room because it was too big for the door, and everything else, setting it up for the ventilation to run through so we wouldn't get the wood shop on fire or nothing. But yeah, that was like the only struggle I had during this whole process with the lockdown and trying to get back in the rhythm of printing or being productive. But yeah, that was it on my end.
Jonathan, if I can ask, what was your first print that was going to be too much?
It was the same image. It was just trying to get the laser to cut it
Oh, okay.
or engrave it on the wood. So, because some spots were too dark, too splotchy, and the wood was too big for the laser bed. So it was just everything.
So a question that I had, and you know, was just as you were all out there in the world and you saw the call for the exhibition come through and the exchange come through. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now, right? Just living through a global pandemic is a lot, and I'm curious, I guess, what was it when you saw that they were like, I'm going to do this. I really want to participate in this. I want to take this opportunity. You know, was there like a spark or a moment that made that choice for you, or you just knew immediately, or did you have to think through it?
I kind of knew immediately because that was my nudge to like start working again. Because during the lockdown, like working online, it was just pretty much teaching and sleeping all day. So after that, after I saw the call, I was like, I got to do this. So that motivated me to actually do work. And since then, I made a couple of more prints for uh, other shows and exhibitions and just friends and family. So that gave me the nudge to actually do work.
I think for me, like, there's been like a couple of like kind of like a, you know, we were supposed to go to like the ceramics conference last year or like, you know, print conferences and stuff that just haven't happened. So it was just kind of like exciting to have a way to like connect with other printmakers, like not just at University of Kentucky.
Yeah, I'd mirror that. You know, I think, I mean, I'd had previous experience with you, Anthony, and I saw your name attached to the project, and I have to admit that that was a big draw. I figured it was going to be a good experience. And then I think that one of the things I really love about printmaking is community. You know, I mean, I think that I just really appreciate that experience and like that chance to kind of connect with others even remotely. And I liked the theme, so it was a good, like I think Jonathan said, and many others have said, just a good impetus to get like the ball rolling on making something and being productive and being really kind of outward like focused for a little while.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was curious, you know, of course, our lives have been upended, right? And what I hear across the board, and it's the same for me, you know, having a motivation to be making right now is a huge challenge. I mean, having the motivation to do much of anything aside from, you know, getting out of bed in the morning or even getting out of bed in the morning is a challenge sometimes. So, you know, on a positive note, I guess though, through struggle can come out, you know, totally new habits and innovative responses. And I'm curious, have you found anything in your, whether it be in your practice or within your just daily life, any new habits that you've taken on that you're really excited about to continue even once we get back to where everything can be open again and there's a vaccine and we can go back to some sort of more normal life?
Yeah, I think for me, I started to make a film because on my last exhibition, someone saw my monoprint and then he said if I would make a short film of my working processes. And I said, okay, I never really did that, but let's try. And I just fell in love with it. And during the years of the MFA, all the other students always told me that, why don't you make a film? I said, no, I'm a painter. I won't ever do a film. So just like, don't tell me that. And now MFA is over and I started to do a film. I was like, oh, really? So maybe I could have started a bit earlier. But yeah, so this is something that I think I will keep. And the other thing is that routine helps me, but because I have two smaller kids, so we have to wake up and I have to take them to school, you know, so it just like frames my day and have to go for them, have to cook for them. And I think it helps to just like go on.
You should.
I had, sorry, Anthony, go
No,
on.
please, George, go ahead.
I was just going to say very briefly that I had the good fortune of having a quick look at Sylvia's film, and it's absolutely outstanding. It really is breathtakingly good. So, you know, for somebody that doesn't make films, it is astonishing. I hope that when it's out, Sylvia, you'll be able to share it more widely.
Yeah,
Very good film.
Still collecting the permissions.
Yes. It's all about copyright, like Emily was saying at the beginning before we were joined by everyone. It is tricky. Yeah.
I was just going to say the same thing. Once you're all finished up, please share it with us. I would love to see it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'll do.
Anyone else? Any new habits that you're excited about moving forward?
Well, actually, I've spoken a lot, so I'll wait until everybody's had a go, and then I'll pop in if time allows.
You can just go ahead. I mean, I think it's totally fine, you know?
In a bit, honestly. I'm happy to. I want to learn a bit rather than just waffle on as I usually do. So,
All right, anyone else? New habits?
I'll pop in. I'm hoping the gardening stays, although I've just been grateful to have like time to breathe because like my commute takes up most of my day. So it's been nice to have more time to do other things. But I hope all the gardening and the actual of making of art stays, and cleaning. I've been like all the things that I was wishing I had more time to do, I've been able to do. I hope that stays, but once I have to get in that car and drive an hour to go to work, it's probably not going to. But the gardening is what I hope stays. I want to keep a garden forever.
Yeah, I would say spending more time outside, like on that note, like my partner lives in Ann Arbor, so I've been spending a lot of time there, and we've discovered like the whole system of like metro parks and stuff like that. It's like our main source of entertainment. So I hope that after everything opens up again, we still do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like spending the time outdoors and making a point to do like a walk every other day at least is really important, and just having the sunshine and the fresh air.
New habit for me is, well, I started growing I have a cactus, bunny ear cactus. I had one in Arizona, but it didn't last long because I forgot to do stuff. But this time around, it's grown and like flourishing. I'm just trying to learn how to take good care of it. So I'm trying to get some more cactus. So I probably start like a little cactus garden or something. I don't know if it's possible in Arkansas because the cold weather is the challenge for me. So I got to find something that's like all year round or something like that. That's a new skill set I think I'm trying to figure out. It's a green thumb for cactus, and probably venture out more or do more research with my family heritage to see like the origin or something. The origin and like how well I already knew kind of how big the family is, but I just want to pretty much just do more research to figure out like where we come from, where originated and stuff like that. So that's another skills that I'm going in since we online and at home more, so I can stay online a little bit longer than normal without the interruptions.
Anyone else? George, I think it's your turn now.
Okay. Well, I mean, a lot of the stuff that people said really resonates with me, and I just made a couple of bits of notes. One of the things that I was doing before the lockdown, I was overcommitted, so I was, writing all these bids. I was committed to residencies and things, and I was dreading it. So when the lockdown came, I mean, I know it sounds really awful, but I withdrew from a couple of things, and it felt like a relief. I did my residency online. I was dreading going. I did it last year in Germany, and I was supposed to go back this year. But it's not just a week there. It takes you months to prepare, and then you have to come back and decompress. And I found that doing it online was just brilliant. It meant that I did a lot of it, and I inherited material from the participants that I put together electronically. But we had a good experience, and it was meaningful. It wasn't just because we had no other choice. It just felt like actually we could have done this a long time ago, and it would have been just as good as turning up and spending all that time, working face to face. I know that being there in the moment with the person is very unique and special, but I think, like Aaron was saying, we run around frantically, and it was almost like this guilt trip, where you have to be fully occupied, 12 hours a day. I mean, this work ethic is pretty dire. And you do get the feeling, if you're an artist as well, that you really have to put the hours in, that, in order to claim something from your work, it's an endless investment, and there are no shortcuts, you have to do it. So I was caught in that. And I found that being online and withdrawing from some of the things that I was committed to was actually very good for me. And I'm hoping to maintain this. I don't know what it is, your ego becomes involved in the things that you do in a way that's not particularly healthy, that you have to do these things for some reason. And I think that it taught me that actually pulling back would be a healthier way to be. And perhaps, create work, I don't have to be at the workshop 12 hours a day to create prints. I can just do one a month, and maybe that's good, I don't know if that makes sense, because very often, yeah, but that's what happened to me.
I think that makes perfect sense. And it's something that I had mentioned to some of my students at the very beginning is thinking that we will likely see things become much slower. And time has occupied a strange space in my life where sometimes it feels incredibly fast, but also incredibly slow at the same time. And I think that moving forward, what I'm hopeful for is that we actually take things at a slower pace, kind of like what you're saying, and realize that doing more and having a greater quantity of things doesn't necessarily mean that life is more valuable in some way, and that actually quite often is the exact opposite of that. And so what you're saying really resonates with me. So there was a question that, so Marika is local and we had spoken recently, and that she had asked, and I thought that it would be a good one here. And it's just that, is there anything that you really miss from the normal times? And, what is it that you miss most from non-COVID time periods?
Well, I actually have one. So I was wanting to teach online before the pandemic happened with some classes, but I miss I teach foundation courses at community colleges. I miss having the work days where I could just talk with my students and just like the presence in the room. Like now it's just so different, and they're learning in a different way, and I don't know if it's necessarily a better way. Like there's pros and cons to both. But the studio days are like the most important thing, and like them just organically interacting with each other, and talking about their work and learning that way, rather than just like do this thing, upload this thing, post on this discussion board, do all these things. So I miss that, and I also miss just like getting to know my students, because I get to know them better and I get to understand their work better. But also like it helps me keep in touch with like popular culture too, which I genuinely miss that. Like new slang every semester. I'm like, all right, what's the new thing? And just like having that social interaction. So I miss that, and that's a big one. I also miss not having anxiety about going and doing things. Like just going outside of my apartment and not like freaking out about the air.
It's understandable. Yes. Great.
Yeah, I agree with Emily. I teach a graphic design class and a printmaking class, and my design class has been so great online because, I mean, I do miss the day. I would do the same thing, have work days for graphic design where I ask them what kind of music they want to listen to, and then I end up eventually like playing what music I like, and then again it's like I get to hear what they think about like my generation. I hear them talk to each other. I'll pull a video up and watch it, things like that. I miss that. But there is this I will keep this after this is all, well, when we get back to normal, meeting with them on Zoom and having them like share their work for graphic design. But my printmaking class is like really hard to do. It's a zine class, so it is they're working digitally, and I'm there, and they can come in, and then we all meet on critique days. But it's been really difficult just to like, a year ago I taught the same class and it was just like a party every day in the classroom because they're sitting there working on their computers or somebody's printing, but they talk to each other. And it might be like the mask, or I don't know what it is. It's just been like a very strange class. I even met with them on Zoom after a few weeks because it was like 4 weeks into the class. I hadn't seen their faces, so I was like, let's meet on Zoom, and they still like, no one really like talked to each other. So I was like, should I leave and then they'll talk to each other? I don't know like how to get that dynamic back from a year ago, but it's weird to see these two different classes working in so many different ways, and they're all like the same. They're all getting the same degree too, so it's not like they're designers and printmakers. It's very mixed up. Yeah, but going back to the other one, I'm still killing plants. I'm still I want it to, there's not much I'm keeping from the pandemic, honestly. When we get back to normal, like I'm ready for it to be over. Killed 3 plants since the pandemic.
Great. Anyone else?
I actually miss the laughter. Like even now on this, some of us are muted, some of us aren't. So like if you're doing like an artist talk or something like that, or a presentation, and you have something built in that's meant to be kind of humorous, and then having that spontaneous laughter, which is a really great bonding almost. So I appreciate that even more now. You can get that little chuckle somewhere,
Yeah. Anyone else?
Just on what Jess said. So what has replaced that is the head bobbing. So you have to like have it on gallery. I've been doing that this whole time, like just see like all the little heads bob and like the little smiles. It's visual now. You have to have it on gallery view.
Yeah, I need to force my students to turn their cameras on next semester because it's a lot of like cameras off and me just going like, I have no idea. There's no reaction. So I'm just like, my bad jokes land much better when they're at least like groaning, but when it's just silence, it's like, oh, this is really awkward.
We had go ahead.
No, please.
We had an artist talk for the exhibition that happened right before this one, which was called Factitious. And so of course the artist talk took place over Zoom, and the artist is Beauvais Lyons, if any of you are familiar with his work, also a printmaker and professor at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And Beauvais is a pretty humorous guy, and I had seen his talk several years before, and it's one of the reasons that I knew that I wanted him to speak, because he's a good speaker. And he said at the end of it, he's like, to exactly what Jessica's point is, you know, that he has all these points built into his talk where he's putting a joke out there, and he's just so used to, you know, having this response of laughter from a group. And it was one of the webinar Zoom events, which in those you can't even see anyone else. It's really just you talking at a screen. And it was very awkward because he's just like, and that's when people would normally laugh, moving right along, you know. So it's just very strange the way in which, you know, this interaction takes place today. But, George, did I cut you off? I feel like you were going to say.
No, not at all. I was just going to say that for me, what's been really noticeable is that I didn't realize how many small interactions I had during the day that were actually very nourishing. It wasn't just the big stuff, you know, meeting friends down at the studio, or actually having social events or going to people's houses. I mean, all that obviously goes without saying. That's all gone. But the thing that surprised me was how much those small incidental encounters in the shop, on the way down, walking, you know, all those things were kind of incrementally very, very important to the way that you felt about your day. And they were very motivational. You know, it was something very nice about bumping into someone in the street and making plans or exchanging some information and feeling comfortable. And now it's kind of very restrained. I hope we maintain some of our distancing when, you know, the flu season is here as we move into the future. Because, you know, I spent 30 years in schools, and I mean, we were so reckless, really. You know, people would just go in, sneeze everywhere. And, you know, so there are some positive things about maintaining some distance and being aware of washing, being, you know, hygienic about the environment. But I miss the incidentals. I didn't realize how significant those things are. I think we underestimate, you know, the impact that other people have on us, not at the deep friendship level, but just meeting people and being human, you know, existing in a system, you know. That's,
meeting physical people, not the flat people all the time, like on the screen.
Well, I have one more question, and then I'll say goodbye, because I don't want to keep you too long, and I want to be respectful of your time. But I also don't want to end on a somber note. And so what I'm curious about is, you know, what is it that you're hopeful for moving forward? Like, what is it that you're most hopeful for 2021? We have another one of our participants also joining us, so I'm gonna let Amy in for the end here. Hi, Amy.
Hey.
Hey, Amy.
Hi.
So we were about to wrap up, but I wanted to, what I just asked everyone was, what is it that you're most hopeful for and excited about for 2021? And yeah, anyone can answer, or you don't have to if you don't want to, but I wanted to wrap up on a hopeful, happy note.
A vaccine would be nice.
Hopefully get back to normal so we can travel, because I miss some of you guys. So I can see you guys in person. Because I had plans for the summer, and then they said lockdown, so just save the money up, buy a new vehicle, I guess. And get rid of the mask, because I'm trying to work out, so I'll use the stairs. So by the time I get to class, I'm out of breath and can't take it off, because that's the requirement for the school. So yeah.
I'm really
Hi,
excited. Oh, go ahead.
you go for it.
Well, mine's a little bit off topic, but I'm really excited that Jill Biden is going to be our first lady, because she teaches at a community college. So, I'm going to start writing letters to her every day, like advocating for adjuncts. Like, it's so, like, I feel like a lot of people aren't really aware of what it's like to be an adjunct. So it's good that we have a person in power who understands that experience and the value of a college education, and how it can be really detrimental when you don't have faculty on campus full time. So that's one thing that I feel a little bit optimistic about.
I feel optimistic about. First, I'm so sorry I'm late. I totally missed up the time zone thing. So apologize. My name's Amy, but I feel optimistic that because we are sort of like stuck in one place and it's difficult to get materials sometimes, that myself and my students and artists everywhere will develop a stronger sense of place and a deeper connection to the materials that they're using, and take a little bit more responsibility and awareness of those materials. And also, I guess maybe a sense of scarcity will lead to a greater sense of sustainability as well.
That's great. Anyone else?
I'm hoping that as we move through the pandemic, that other things that we have not been able to focus on will come back into focus again. I know you're trying to finish on an optimistic note, Anthony. I'm sorry. I don't know why I keep bringing you back to the things that are problematic. But in Europe we have a huge, crisis with people trying to come into Europe. And all that has been sort of suppressed now. It's become a secondary story to the pandemic. I mean, obviously, there are priorities, and also the environment. I'm hoping that, some of the things that have been highlighted about having a scarcity of materials, as we go into the new era, I'm hoping that we will start being a bit more reflective about those things, but also take back ownership of the things that, we've not been able to focus on now. But I do like the idea of taking the foot off the pedal so that we are much more considerate, thoughtful about the things we make and how we put ourselves out there. I'm hopeful, I think it's not all been bad. My great sense of loss is about the loss of life. I think as humans, we needed to reflect what it was that was going on, because not everything was right and not everything is right, quite clearly, but the loss of life has been horrendous, and that aside, we've got an opportunity now to be more philosophical, more reflective about the way that we move forward and how we interact with each other. And I've made some great friends online, which has been amazing, So I'm hoping that I will maintain those relationships as we go forward.
Anyone else? All right. Well, I think that's a good note to end on. Amy, I'm sorry that things got confusing with the time and the time zone changes. But thank you all so much for taking the time out of your Sundays to get together. It was really, really wonderful to hear from all of you and to see all of you. And thank you so much for participating in the exchange and the exhibition. And I'm hopeful and look forward to seeing you all in the real world in the future.
Anthony, I want to say thanks to you for putting this together and for making the best like actual portfolio folder I've ever gotten in one of these.
Yeah.
I was amazed. That was so amazing. Really good.
Yeah, well done. Well done, Anthony. Really good.
I was just opening it and closing it for like 5 minutes, watching that thing fold in. Great.
Thank you, David.
Yep. Of course.
All right. Well, take care, everyone. Have a
Bye, everyone.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.